Before we begin, I will pray for us. Let's pray. Holy Triune God, thank you so much for this time. Thank you for the brothers and sisters. We lift up this time to you and ask that you'll guide our hearts and our minds. However we're feeling, whatever is occupying our minds and our hearts, we surrender to you. Lord, I ask and pray for all of us who do not feel like being here, who may be too tired to care, who may be thinking about other things. We ask that in all these things we surrender to you. Lord, teach us to worship you in and through the busyness of life. Teach us to worship you in and through not having the feelings of worshiping you. And that in all these things, Lord, we live a life more and more faithful to you, that the rest of this world will continue to know who you are as well. And we surrender this in your name, Jesus, we pray. How are you today? Tired? Fine. Okay. So if you're anything like me, you would hear many times when you run into your friends, or many times when you run into people you know, like at school, or people like on your sports team, for example, or even some of your coworkers. And just in passing, they can ask you, how are you today? Right? And many times, whether or not they actually want to hear how you're doing, well, it's hit or miss. But regardless, if we were to answer these questions today, if someone were to ask you, how are you doing today? You may be tempted to say, oh, I'm fine, or I'm tired. And when they prompt a bit more, okay, but why? Why are you tired? Or why are you only just fine today? And many times, if we're honest, we can say, well, you know, last week I just didn't finish a project that I probably should have finished. You know? Or how about, well, you know, last night I stayed up too late because I was doing this last minute chore, last minute task. Now I'm feeling the pain right now. In other words, many times when people ask us how we are doing, we base it off of our progress. We base it off of a to-do list. We base it off of productivity. How we are doing depends on our circumstances. And if we're honest, this is how we communicate. How we are doing depends on our circumstances. It depends on whether I got A, B, C, or D done. It depends whether or not I've progressed, if I've grown in this area of discipline, or in school, or in work, or anything of that nature. And if we're really honest, many times, these ideas also bleed over into our spiritual life. When someone asks you, how are you doing spiritually? How's your relationship with God? What are we tempted to say? Well, I haven't read the Bible in a while. I mean, the last time I opened the Bible was when I was at church on Sunday. And even then, it wasn't really the Bible. It was just, you know, something printed on the bulletin board. Or, how about this? Well, I haven't prayed in a while, so, I mean, I don't know. I guess I'm okay. I'm still alive, I guess. In other words, we're doing the exact same thing here that we're doing with homework or with work projects. We're saying that our spiritual health depends on our circumstances. It depends on what we're doing and what we're not doing. It depends on our productivity. This is the mindset that's circulated right now in this culture, in this environment we live in. But thanks be to God that the Lord has shown us what is it about this lie of productivity, this lie of progress that has infected us, especially our relationship with God. What is it about this that we must be aware of? And praise be to God that the Lord has instructed us on how to live in such an environment today. Now, this past month, we have been going through the book of Exodus. And of course, in Exodus, it is a story. It is a continuous story. You must keep in mind. And today, we find ourselves again in Exodus. So let us continue with this story in Exodus and this idea of productivity and our well-being. Now today, we find ourselves walking alongside with two 80-year-old something brothers. Now these brothers are walking at a brisk pace, as if they're in a hurry or there's something important they're attending to. Now, the younger brother, hobbling along with his staff, as quick as his 80-year-old something body would carry him, takes a moment to look around him, and he realizes, wow, just soaks it in, breathes in the air, soaks in the visual arts. Wow, I'm in a palace. And I can just imagine this younger brother thinking to himself, it's been over 40 years since I've been here. And yet, just a familiarity, a sense of familiarity about it. And so today we see that Moses and Aaron have come into the palace of Pharaoh, or the Egyptian king. Now as they're going along, I can see Moses just thinking back, okay, focus Moses, focus. Why am I here? Why am I here? And as he's walking, I can see him thinking and replaying the very moments that led up to this walk. That it was in the wilderness that Moses met the God of his ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And if it were not for this God breaking his 400 years plus of silence, then perhaps Moses would have just remained, would have been content to live his life on autopilot mode. But it's because this God of his ancestors spoke to Moses that Moses is here today in the Egyptian palace. And as Moses is going, I can hear him thinking to himself, I know that God of my ancestors has instructed me to go to Pharaoh and to tell Pharaoh to let my people go. But I just can't get over the fact of my doubt and of my concern. And I can hear Moses replaying this conversation, replaying his experience at the burning bush. I can hear him replaying this in his heart. And it goes something like this. But God, who am I that I'm going to go tell Pharaoh? What are my credentials? Why should Pharaoh listen to me? Or better yet, God, who are you? You haven't spoken in over 400 years. What are your credentials? Why should I listen, God? Or moreover, at least as these echoes of doubts and questions continue to spiral, you can further hear Moses say, but God, what if I go to Israel and I tell them what you said, but they don't listen to me? Because I haven't been around them in a long time. What are my credentials for these Hebrew or these Israelite people? Not only that, God, but this last thing is very personal here. But God, I do not have the ability to speak in front of people. I have a speech impediment. I have a stutter. Now, if this is new to you, yes, Moses. Many theologians and scholars say that Moses had a speech impediment. Most likely, he had a stuttering speech impediment. Meaning that whenever he stood in front, did public speaking, he would repeat the same words over and over again, struggling to get it out of his mouth. In other words, Moses saw that God, there's so much doubt so much question on my mind right now. And yet, here I am, at a brisk pace, to approach one of the most powerful men in the area, to tell him that the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob has instructed him to let his people go. But at this thought, I can see Moses start to panic a bit, start to feel nervous. So quickly, he tries to distract himself. And he looks at his older brother, Aaron. And finally, they make eye contact. And Moses feels just a brief sense of relief, knowing that God has provided Aaron, his older brother, to assist him in this quest. And as soon as Moses finished this thought, he looked forward. Finally, the time has come. He sees the king of Egypt. He sees Pharaoh sitting on his throne. And I can hear Moses think to himself, all right, this is it. This is the moment. After 400 years, after God spoke to me in a burning bush, after I've been reunited with my brother Aaron, this is the moment. God is going to move Pharaoh's heart and let my people go. What does Moses say? You have your Bibles with you. Turn with me. Exodus chapter 5. And for a warning here, we're going to be jumping around a bit between chapter 5 and 7. Select verses here. But we'll begin here in chapter 5. In Exodus chapter 5, as Moses and Aaron approached Pharaoh, what do they say? Verse 1. Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, let my people go, that they may hold a feast to me in the wilderness. Let my people go, that they may hold a feast to me in the wilderness. After 40 years, some of the first words that Moses says to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, is to let God's people go. And I could just hear it. As soon as Moses finishes this sentence, silence immerses herself into the air. Pharaoh, with his black beady eyes, looks at Moses and Aaron, studies them as if they were under a microscope. It looks like he's thinking about what Moses and Aaron is saying. And then, just as the silence couldn't get any heavier, Pharaoh says, in verse 2, but Pharaoh said, who is the Lord, that I shall obey his voice and let Israel go? I do not know the Lord, and moreover, I will not let Israel go. In other words, Pharaoh says no. Pharaoh says no. And as soon as Moses could register this, I could see his mind just scramble. But, wait. Pharaoh, you said no. Can you do that? Can you say no to God? Well, Pharaoh just did, but I can imagine if I were Moses, I'd be, but if God said that his people will be let go, then shouldn't it happen? And yet, why is Pharaoh saying no? He doesn't even know who the Lord God of the Israelites are. Pharaoh says no. And I can imagine Moses thinking, well, maybe Pharaoh just didn't understand me. And Aaron, I understand I've been in the wilderness for 40 years. My language skills isn't the best. So let's rephrase that. Let's try one more time. And so in verse 3, how did they rephrase that? Then they said, "The God of the Hebrews has met with us. Please, let us go a 3 days' journey into the wilderness, that we may sacrifice to the Lord our God. Or else he'll fall upon us with pestilence or with the sword." And quickly, almost instinctively, Pharaoh stands up and he barks. Verse 4 and 5. But the king of Egypt said to them, "Moses and Aaron, why do you take the people away from their work? Get back to your burdens." And Pharaoh continued, "Behold, the people of the land are many, and you make them rest from their burdens." And at the sound of that, Moses and Aaron are quickly ushered out of the palace. I can only imagine the shock that Moses may be feeling. That after this God of the Hebrews spoken after 400 years and told Moses to go tell Pharaoh to let the people go, what happens when Moses goes and tells Pharaoh? Pharaoh says no. He brushes him off like he's a fly. And now I can see Moses and Aaron sitting outside of the palace, wondering to himself, what just happened? If God said it was going to happen, why didn't it? Brothers and sisters, I can't even imagine how many times in your life you may have felt a similar way. Where you truly believe that God told you something, that something was going to happen. Something great, something unforgettable. And I can't imagine how excited we must have been when God confirmed that to us. So excited that we wanted to partake in His work. And the moment that we do, we meet rejection. We don't meet progress. Instead, we meet a detour. Now we can see here that Moses, I can only picture Moses here thinking to himself, what did we do wrong? What did we say wrong? That God said it was going to happen and it should have happened, and yet, here we are, sitting in our rejection. I don't know. So I can picture Moses and Aaron deciding, all right, let's regroup. So they start to make their way back towards the Hebrew workstations and the construction zones in Egypt. And as they're walking, they're just contemplating, what did we do wrong? Did we forget a certain instruction that God said? Was there something we left out that maybe didn't work like a formula to get the product we wanted? What happened? I can picture Moses and Aaron walking back, their heads down, thinking, especially Moses, so deep in thought. And as they're walking, they make it to the workstations. And I can just imagine that Moses is so lost in thought that he doesn't even realize what's going on around him. But quickly, his brother Aaron taps him and says, "Hey Moses, where's all the workers? This is the workstation for Israelites, right? But there's no one here." Quickly, I can see Moses look up and start to feel a glimmer of hope. And I can picture Moses saying something like this, "Oh my goodness, Aaron, Pharaoh listened. He let our people go. This is the work of God. Surely this is the work of God." Even though at first it might have felt like Pharaoh was being abrasive, and yet, towards the end, Pharaoh listened. Maybe Pharaoh just didn't want to tell us because of his pride, I don't know. But Pharaoh must have let our people go because they're not at the workstations, they're not on the construction sites, where do they go? There's only one logical explanation. Because of our request. Because God has changed Pharaoh's heart behind the scenes. Now our people are getting ready to leave. Hey, Aaron, let's go to the villages and let's gather up the people so we can start heading out. Let's go. And so I can see Aaron and Moses wobbling over to the Hebrew villages, so excited, so much anticipation, wondering where did all of their people go? It could only be the Pharaoh listened. And so as Moses and Aaron go into the village, they step in and surprisingly it's quiet. It's pretty quiet for people packing and moving, but that's okay. So they keep walking, they go in, and finally Moses and Aaron meet one of their fellow Hebrew women. And I can just picture them, I can imagine them saying to her, "Hey sister, how's the packing going? Are you guys ready yet?" And I could see her look at Moses and Aaron pretty confused. And at that, Moses would say, "Well, the workstations are empty. There's no one doing construction, so aren't you guys packing? Because earlier we went to Pharaoh and we told him to let you guys go, because God of our ancestors has commanded it to be." And at this Hebrew woman, face all disfigured, finally reaches her composure. And I can hear her say something like this to Moses. "Oh, Moses, what are you talking about? Pharaoh has not let our people go. Didn't you hear, Moses? That just earlier today, Pharaoh commanded to not give our people, the Hebrew people, the necessary material, the straws, to make the bricks. Pharaoh commanded that our people had to go find their own materials. They had to go find their own straws. But still keep the same number of bricks being made every day. In other words, Pharaoh told the Israelites that they had to continue to do their work. But this time, they won't have one of the most necessary components they need to build and to do their work. They have to gather it themselves and still keep the production levels the same. This is an impossible task. It's like saying, for many of the teens out here, your teacher telling you, "Hey, solve this problem." But I'm not going to give you the equation. Well, how can we solve this problem if you don't give us the equation? Well, that's your problem. Figure it out. But I still expect you to finish it at the end of the day. Or, for those in working class, or if your boss came to you and said, "Hey, finish this project by the end of the week." But I actually don't have any, starting points for you. I actually haven't done a survey. I haven't done any profiles for you. No portfolios. So just start from scratch. But it's still due at the end of the week. So get to it. Well, of course, this seems like an impossible task. And this is exactly the weight that Pharaoh has given to the Israelites. Exactly because Moses and Aaron's request to let the people go. And that the sound of that Aaron and Moses run as fast as their 80-year-old something bodies can carry them through the Egyptian terrain. And as they're running, I can just hear Moses debating with himself, what in the world is happening? Earlier, God said that go talk to Pharaoh and he'll let the people go. But when I went to talk to Pharaoh, it didn't seem like he listened. And now, it turns out that exactly because we talked to Pharaoh, the burdens of the Israelites is even heavier now. This is the exact opposite the exact opposite of what Moses and Aaron were expecting for their people. How can God allow this to happen? Weren't we just trying to be obedient to God? Weren't we just trying to listen to God and talk to Pharaoh? And yet, Pharaoh has made things worse. And so finally, Moses and Aaron reach the palace. And as soon as they reach the palace, they see a group of Egyptian slave masters and Israelite managers exit the palace. And some of the Israelite managers saw Moses and Aaron and locked their gaze upon them. And walked over them, walked to them as quick as possible. As if there was a mission, as if there was something going on. And so he went and confronted Moses. And this is what he said to Moses. Here in verse 20. Chapter 5, verse 20. They met Moses and Aaron, who were waiting for them. And they said to them, "The Lord look on you and judge, because you made us stink in the sight of Pharaoh and his servants. And you have put a sword in the Egyptians' hands to kill us." In other words, the Israeli managers over the slave population said to Moses and Aaron, "You have given Pharaoh arsenal. You've given him an arsenal. You've given him ammunition to hurt us even more. Moses and Aaron, what are you doing? What are you thinking? This is not achieving God's promise or God's work at all. You're not accomplishing your goal here, Moses and Aaron. What are you doing? You're making things worse. Just stop. Please. Just stop. You're making everything worse." And at this, I can imagine. I can only imagine the heartache that Moses may have felt. And the conversation he may be having with himself. It could go something like this, but God, I listened, didn't I? Didn't I listen to you, God? Why didn't this goal of releasing the Israelites come to fruit? Why didn't this quest of leaving Egypt, why wasn't it accomplished? I listened to you, God. Didn't I listen to you? I went and talked with Pharaoh. And yet the goal is still unfinished. Israel is in a worse position than they were before. What is happening, God? I don't understand. And we see this here when Moses expresses it. Verse 22 and 23. Then Moses turned to the Lord and said, "O Lord, why have you done evil to this people? Why did you ever send me? For since I came to Pharaoh to speak in your name, he has done evil to this people. And you, God, you have not delivered your people at all." God, I listened. And yet, the goal is not finished. We're in a worse position than before. What is happening, God? I don't understand. I thought I was obeying you. What is going on? How does God respond to Moses? Because understandably so, Moses is agitated. Moses is angry. Moses is confused, as many of us would be. This is what the Lord says to Moses. Chapter 6, verse 6. what does the Lord say to Moses? He says, "Say therefore to the people of Israel, I am the Lord, and I will bring you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians, and I will deliver you from slavery. I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and great acts of judgment. And I will take you to be my people, and I will be your God, and you shall know that I am the Lord your God, who has brought you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians. I will bring you into the land that I swore to give to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I will give it to you as a possession, for I am the Lord." I mean, that sounds great. The Lord reiterates his promise. The Lord restates who he is. But he doesn't answer Moses' questions. God does not answer Moses' questions. Instead, he reorients Moses and says, "Hey Moses, don't forget why we are here. Don't forget the purpose here. I understand that the goal is not accomplished yet. But don't give up. Don't get flustered. Say what I have just said to the people of Israel, to re-emphasize who God is and his promises. Even in the face of this atrocity, re-emphasize my promises." And what does Moses do? Chapter 6, verse 9 says, "Moses spoke to the people of Israel, but they did not listen to Moses because of their broken spirit and harsh slavery." The people don't even listen to Moses anymore because they've already had a bad experience. What happens when Moses spoke to Pharaoh? Why would they want to listen to Moses right now? And I can only imagine how hopeless Moses may have felt. And his own people aren't even going to listen to him anymore. And God of his ancestors didn't even answer his questions. Instead, he just continued on with who he was and his promises. And yet, those same promises that Moses tried to re-emphasize to Israel, they didn't listen. But God doesn't stop there. What else does God say to him? In verse 10. "So the Lord said to Moses, go in, tell Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, to let the people of Israel go out of this land." Didn't God already tell Moses to say that to Pharaoh one time before? Why is God telling Moses that again? Why is God telling Moses to do the same thing that Moses already tried? And it looks like failed at. Why does God answer Moses' cries and complaint with, "Hey Moses, just go back in and tell Pharaoh one more time to let my people go"? Now, if Moses is like any of us, I can imagine the questions in his mind. God, did you not hear what just happened? Did you not see? We've already tried that. We've already tried telling Pharaoh to let our people go. And what did he do? He made things worse for us. Why would we want to go and tell Pharaoh one more time to let our people go? Why, God? Why are you telling us to do this again? And we hear this when Moses says in verse 12, "But Moses said to the Lord, behold, the people of Israel have not listened to me. How then shall Pharaoh listen to me? For I am of uncircumcised lips." In other words, if Israel didn't listen, surely Pharaoh will not listen again. Because again, Moses is focusing on, because God, remember I told you once at the burning bush, God, my speech ability is not good. And so maybe the first time when I went to speak to Pharaoh, maybe because my speech ability wasn't good, that Pharaoh thought that the appropriate response was to harshen the punishment. God, remember, I can't speak. So why would Israel listen? Why would Pharaoh listen? Why are you telling me to go again, God? This goal is not accomplished. It's still here. Israel is still slaves. We're still stuck in Egypt. But why are you telling us to go one more time, to tell Pharaoh one more time to let our people go? There's no progress, God. What's the use? What's the point? How does God answer Pharaoh? What does the Lord say to Pharaoh? What does the Lord say to Moses now? The Lord said in chapter 7 now, verse 1, and the Lord said to Moses, see, I have made you like God to Pharaoh, and your brother Aaron shall be your prophet. You shall speak all that I command you, and your brother Aaron shall tell Pharaoh to let the people of Israel go. But I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and though I multiply my signs and wonders in the land of Egypt, Pharaoh will not listen to you. Then I will lay my hand on Egypt and bring my host, my children of Israel, out of the land of Egypt by great acts of judgment. Then the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord, when I stretch out my hand against Egypt, and when I bring my people out of Israel. In other words, how does God answer Moses? When Moses says, God, Israelites didn't listen to me. Pharaoh didn't listen to me. I can't even talk. My abilities to communicate are not good, God. Why are you telling me to go again? What does God say? Emphasizing it one more time. The Lord said to Moses, I have made you, Moses, like God to Pharaoh, and your brother Aaron shall be your prophet. You, Moses, shall speak all that I command you, and your brother Aaron shall tell Pharaoh to let the people of Israel go. In other words, God is telling Moses, hey Moses, say it again. But this time, don't speak to Pharaoh directly. This time, you, Moses, you are going to be the representative of God on earth to Pharaoh. You are going to be almost an equivalent of that. Because if you didn't know, in this day and age, Pharaoh, the Egyptian king, he himself was considered a god. What other way to defeat a god but with another god? If people believed that Pharaoh was God, what was the only way to reverse, to defeat this type of thinking? That now Moses and Aaron aren't just going to go down and kick Pharaoh's door and tell Pharaoh what to do. No, this time, Moses is going to be the representative of God. And Aaron is going to be his prophet. In other words, Aaron is going to be the spokesperson for Moses. From God, through Moses, through Aaron, to Pharaoh. This time, Moses will say the same thing, let God's people go. But what does God say? I will harden. Pharaoh will not listen to you. Pharaoh will not listen to you. Just think about that. Hey Moses, go a second time to Pharaoh, but this time, whisper in your brother's ear. Don't talk to Pharaoh directly. Whisper in your brother's ear. And then your brother will talk to Pharaoh. But even if that's the case, I am already telling you, Moses, Pharaoh's not going to listen to you. Then what's the point, God? If Pharaoh's not going to listen, why do I even need to tell him anything? What's the point? We're not progress. There's no progress. Nothing's happening here. There's no production here. All God is telling Moses to do is, hey, just tell Pharaoh a second time. Not directly. Tell him through your brother. But hey, by the way, Pharaoh's not going to listen. Okay, then what's the point, God? But what does God say? God says, sure, Pharaoh won't listen. But it is only by God's hand. When God lays his hand down, when the people of Israel leave Egypt, then Pharaoh will truly know who God is. Remember earlier in chapter 5? Pharaoh's like, who is God? I don't know who God is. And now in chapter 7, what does God say? Pharaoh will know who I am when Israel leaves Egypt. In other words, God is saying, Moses, slow down. I didn't ask you to go to Pharaoh and convince him to let Israel go. I didn't ask you to go to Pharaoh and debate with him to let Israel go. No, Moses. The only thing I told you to do, just speak. Just say God's words. Regardless of progress, regardless if there's productivity or not. Because Moses, and for all of us here, we need to know this from this narrative. Just like Moses, many times in our life, we only want to do things for God when we know that there's going to be fruits. We only want to do things for God when we know there's a pay. But the moment we know that there's no payoff, the moment we know that's going to be very difficult, what is our instinct? Not me, God, find someone else. But from this story, what do we see? God tells Moses to go to Pharaoh a second time and tell Pharaoh to let his people go. It was not about Moses convincing Pharaoh. It was about Moses obeying. All of the convincing and all of the progress is up to God. That is only in God's power to do. But as for all of us, just like Moses, as for all of us, let us continue to strive to be obedient where we are today. Let's not fall into the lies and the trap of this world's idea of productivity, this world's idea of progress, this world's idea of having instant gratification. Let us be aware that when we follow God, it's not a business model. When we follow God, it's not plugging in a formula and getting out whatever you want. No. When we follow God, just like Moses, it's to obey. It's to be God's witness to this world. And all of the great miracles and the great powers God will do in His time. But as for you and me, let us strive to be faithful and obedient every single day in big and small things, leaving the production value and the production rate and the progress to God. It is only God who is able to do that. And the most profound example of obedience without much payout is Christ Himself. Even when many people were rejecting Christ, spitting on Him, ridiculing Him, He still obeyed the Father. And because Christ obeyed, we can truly live in Him now. But brothers and sisters, for us today, let us take upon this as well. If you truly follow the God of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, if you truly live in Jesus Christ, if you're filled with the Holy Spirit. Let us live in this manner, a manner of obedience, not a manner of productivity or a manner of progress. Now, for many of us here today, for young people, here's a simple thing for you to take home today as you live obediently to God. Right? It can be something as small and as simple as just letting your friends at school know, hey, I'm a Christian. It doesn't need to be anything elaborate. It's not rocket science. Don't make it complicated. It can be something that small, that simple. And from planting that one little seed of letting your friends know that you're a Christian, I believe the Lord will carry that on throughout your years together. And will continue to challenge you as well. And what does it mean to be a Christian? Living amongst non-Christians. So let us start with that for us young people. But for the working class, for us parents, when you're in the workforce, in the same way, yes, let people know that you are a Christian as well. Don't be afraid. Because this small statement of faith might appear to be small. But I know that the Lord will use that to grow. Because you don't know how many people around you, your coworkers or people you know, might also be trying to hide their faith as well, because they're afraid as well. And for us, within our families, now this is where it gets really sticky. But for us in the families, how do we obey the Lord in our relationships with our family members? Because we know they know how to press our buttons. They know how to manipulate and have these emotional roller coasters. But how do we do that within our families as well? How do we remain obedient and yet not focus so much on the fruits? Not be so fixated on the progress. Now for us as family members, continue to think for yourself. What does it mean today for me to obey God? Now of course there are many instructions on loving, serving, taking care of one another. Let's begin with yourself. How can you obey God today? Whether you think it's big or small, it doesn't matter. How can you obey God today? Where you are, in your families, at school, at work, driving a car, anything. How can you obey God today? How can all of us continue to show who God is in the things we do and say without instantly expecting God to grow this tree from this little seed that we planted? You must ask yourself this question as well. But one thing I would encourage for many of us on how to do this. How do we remain in a posture of obedience and a posture of surrender to our Lord every day? And I would say for all of us here, begin in prayer. Begin the day on your knees, asking the Lord to continue to open your eyes to these opportunities around you. It could be as small as, for example, for parents, not lecturing your kids as soon as they get home from school. Because I'm sure your children have had a long day at school as well, with many other stresses and pressures that they face. Or it can be for teens, for your parents, it can be for not pestering them right away as soon as you get home from school. I'm hungry, my feet hurt, I'm tired, I don't want to do homework right now, I don't want to clean my room. But to just allow your parents breathing room as well. Because of course, they have been through a hard, stressful day as well. But for all of us to remember, what is the good of the other? That in obeying God today, how can we edify? How can we encourage? How can we build the other person up? and anticipate that they may do the same towards us as well. Today, brothers and sisters, let us continue to focus on obedience. It wasn't overnight that God did the Exodus. No. It took a while. Because after chapter 7, it starts the plagues, the 10 plagues. It took a while before Israel left Egypt. But in that moment, Moses is a prime example of that obedience every day. Without expecting instant results, instant progress. And Moses learned that the hard way, as we all will continue to do. But for us today, keep that in your hearts and in your minds, that we all may continue to live obediently to the Lord and have that as our primary focus, as opposed to progress, as opposed to results. Let's pray. Holy Triune God, thank you so much for this time. We ask that your Holy Spirit will continue to solidify all of this in our hearts. That you will continue to teach us what does it mean, specifically where we are to live in obedience to you. To not be so quick to look for the fruits, to not be so quick to look for the results, Lord, but to remain in a posture of obedience. Lord, we ask that you continue to guide us all, no matter how impatient we may feel, no matter how tired we may feel, how fatigued we may feel in this spiritual battle, in this spiritual life. We ask that your Holy Spirit will encourage us. Let us know, Lord, that the progress doesn't depend on us. Praise be to God that the progress does not depend on us. The progress only depends on you. And we thank you that you've sent your Son, Jesus Christ, to show us what is true obedience, to show us what fruits comes from true obedience. We thank you that you've allowed us to participate in Christ's finished work. We thank you for bestowing upon us your presence, your indwelling, the seal of your Holy Spirit. Continue to lead us, Holy Spirit, to be able to live in this life in a manner pleasing and worshipful to you. Teach us what does it mean to obey, even in the face of adversary, even in the face of discomfort, even in the face of slow progress. And all these things, we thank you for your word today. Continue to grow that within our hearts in your timing and in your ways. We surrender all this unto you. In your name, Jesus, we pray.